Hi there, welcome. Come on in and get nice and comfortable. So, you're here for your assessment today, is that correct? Great. Well, I'll talk you through what we're going to do in just a moment. However, I'd like to begin by saying thank you for coming today and to say that it's quite a scary step sometimes to do things like this. But it's a really positive step, and here's why. Firstly, once we've done here, we might be able to ascertain with a little bit more information whether you are neurodiverse. And if you are, we can then help you to understand yourself a little bit better and perhaps the world around you a little bit better to help you improve your quality of life. Conversely, if you don't get that diagnosis and you were convinced that you were going to, then we can help you through that as well. So there's a lot to think about. But for now, we're going to concentrate on the assessment, okay? Great. So, what we're going to do today is there are a couple of questionnaires, and all you will do is answer to what extent you agree with the statements that you're being given. In between, we'll do a couple of little attention assessments, because sometimes this can feel a little bit long and sometimes it can be hard to concentrate for long periods of time on things like this, okay? So it'll be some questions, and then we're going to look at some different colours and some questions, and then we're going to look at some lights and not look at some lights, and then a few more questions, and that's it. What will happen at the end is I'll go away, write everything up into a report, which we'll send to you along with all these answers, and then we can take it from there. How does that sound? It's a lot of information, however, it's much easier than it sounds, I promise. Okay, so, are you ready to start with some questions? Wonderful. Okay, so, as we're going, you might find some common themes in these questions. You might hear these questions repeated, but it's just to give us a good idea of what's going on. And if you can, answer as honestly as possible, because that will help us in getting a clearer picture of you. Any questions before we start? Any questions for me before I give all the questions to you? Okay, it shouldn't take too long at all. Are you ready? Great, thank you. So, nice and comfortable. If at any time you want to stop, pause, anything like that, just let me know, okay? And if you want to skip any of these questions, that's absolutely fine as well. Okay, so for these first ones, there are 5 possible answers. So, very often, often, sometimes, rarely, or never. And as we go, I can remind you that they're the responses, but once you get going, you should find it comes more easily. So, the first question is this: do you talk to friends at a party the same way you would talk to co-workers in the office? So, very often, often, sometimes, rarely, or never. Do you talk to friends at a party the same way you would talk to co-workers in the office? Great. Simple as that. You okay to carry on? Fab. So, Next question. Are expressions like curiosity killed the cat, or don't count your chickens before they hatch odd to you? Very often, often, sometimes, rarely, or never? Thank you. Do you enjoy inventing your own words or expressions that might seem quirky to others? See, sometimes those answers are just right there. Next one. Were you bullied at school? Very often, often, sometimes, rarely, or never? Are you really, really good at a skill, like maths or music, but then struggle in other areas? Great. That's the first sheet done. So now, think about your daily routine. Would you say that you follow the same schedule every day and that you don't like unexpected events? Thank you. So next, even when you're in a quiet place, like a library, do you find yourself making involuntary noises, like clearing your throat over and over again? So very often, often, sometimes, rarely, or never. Okay. Do you have trouble understanding what people mean when they say they feel embarrassed for somebody else? Great. Are you always bumping into things or tripping over your own feet? Next, do you prefer to read non-fiction over fiction books? It is a very different question. Do you prefer to play individual games, like golf, where everyone works for themselves, instead of team sports and games, where everybody works towards a common goal? Are you always the first to notice when a friend has got a haircut or made a small change to their appearance? Do your family remembers. Do your family members lovingly refer to you as the eccentric one of the family? I get that. Have you always wanted a best friend but never found one? When you're having a conversation with someone, do you prefer to look at the wall or their shoes, anywhere but directly into their eyes? Is your memory like a trap, even for facts that you don't always completely understand? They're just in there. Do people say that you speak like a robot? How often do you have difficulty concentrating on what people say to you, even when they're speaking to you directly? How often do you have difficulty concentrating on what people say to you, even when they're speaking to you directly? Very often, sometimes, rarely, or never. How often do you put things off until the last minute? Very quick answer there. Okay. So, we're coming to the end of this first set of questions. How often do you have difficulty unwinding and relaxing when you have time to yourself? Very often, sometimes, rarely, or never. How often do you depend on others to keep your life in order and attend to details? When you're in a conversation, how often do you find yourself finishing the sentence of the people you're talking to before they can finish it themselves? I'm terrible for that. How often do you leave your seat in meetings or in other situations where you would be expected to remain seated? So how often, when you should be sat down, do you get up? Great, thank you. So, that is the first set of questions done. How are you feeling? Are you feeling okay? There's some quite difficult questions in there, some quite personal questions. So I thank you for answering them honestly and answering them all for me. Okay, so we'll just have a quick break before the next set. Let's pop my clipboard down. And I'd like to look at some different coloured pens, if that's okay. Something nice and easy, something that hopefully might not be too taxing for you, but so you're not having to think about responses to questions for a minute. Okay, so pick these up. What I'd like you to do is take a look at these for me. There we go. Ooh, if I can hold them for you. So, tell me what colours you can see. That's great. And what colours now? Brilliant. Thank you. What colour? Lovely. Colours here? Great. What colours here? See all these? Great. What colours here? Great. And finally, without looking, can you name all the colours that you've just seen? Great. Oops. Thank you. Just make some notes on that, okay? Okay. So, some more questions. Are you ready? There's fewer than last time, but your responses are slightly different, I'm afraid. Is that okay? Great. So this time your responses are never, rarely, sometimes, often, or very often. But again, I can remind you of these as we go. And it's the same formula as last time. I will give you a statement and you will reply with never, rarely, sometimes, often, or very often. So shall we start with one? Great. So, how often do you have trouble wrapping up the final details of a project once the challenging parts have been done? So once the difficult bits are over, how hard do you find it to wrap up that project? Never, rarely, sometimes, often, or very often. Great. And we're off. How often do you have difficulty getting things in order when you have to do a task that requires organisation? Oh, okay. How often do you have problems remembering appointments or obligations? Never, rarely, sometimes, often, very often. Okay. When you have a task that requires a lot of thought, how often do you avoid or delay getting started? How often do you fidget or squirm with your hands and feet when you have to sit down for a long time? And how often do you feel overly active and compelled to do things like you were driven by a motor? Okay. How often do you make careless mistakes when you have to work on a boring or difficult project? How often do you have difficulty keeping your attention when you're doing boring or repetitive work? How often do you have difficulty concentrating on what people say to you, even when they're speaking to you directly? Thank you. How often do you misplace or have difficulty finding things at home or at work? If only people would leave them where you had put them, you'd be able to find them, right? How often are you distracted by activity or noise around you? How often do you leave your seat in meetings or in other situations when you should be seated? Yes, so slightly different responses to similar questions like we spoke about earlier. Yeah, well remembered. How often do you feel restless or fidgety? How often do you have difficulty unwinding when you're relaxing at home? How often do you find yourself talking too much when you're in social situations? When you're in a conversation, how often do you find yourself finishing the sentences of others before they can finish them themselves? How often do you have difficulty waiting your turn in situations where turn taking is required? Yep, so that could be in conversation or doing an activity, something like that. how often do you interrupt others when they're busy? Okay, that's that one done. And I'd like to say that, based on responses so far, I'd like to carry on to the third one if that's okay, but after another little break. Is that okay with you? And how are you feeling? Still okay with this process? Again, thank you for answering all of those, and thank you for answering honestly. So, what I'd like to do now, just so you can relax from the questions, is just ask you to play a couple of games with me with these lights. Is that okay? Nothing too long, nothing too strenuous. However, once we get started, if you would like to stop, if it's not something you want to do, just tell me. That's absolutely fine. Okay? So, 2 clicks to put these on. Okay? So what I'd like you to do first is follow this light for me. Ignore this one completely. And while you do that, I'm going to watch you. Okay, here we go. You ready? It won't take too long. Okay. Watching this light. Thank you. Okay, not too bright. Give it a few blinks. Lovely. Now then, this time, I'd like you to look at my nose. And I don't want you to look at these lights at all. Okay? So, looking at my nose, not at the lights. Ready? Okay, here we go. Looking at my nose. Yeah. Well done. Nearly there. Still looking at my nose. Wonderful. Okay, great. And finally, just down to 1. Follow this. Okay, last time. That's great. All done. Thank you very much. As before, I'll make 1 or 2 notes quickly. Just have a good blink. How are you feeling now, okay? Great. A few more questions, and then we're all done for today. Thank you for your patience. Okay, so we're down to 4 responses this time. we definitely agree, we slightly agree, we slightly disagree, or we definitely disagree. So, we definitely agree, we slightly agree, we slightly disagree, or we definitely disagree. Shall we try one? Great. So, I prefer to do things with others rather than on my own. Definitely agree, slightly disagree, or definitely disagree. Okay. I prefer to do things the same way over and over again. Definitely agree, slightly disagree, definitely disagree. If I try to imagine something, I find it very easy to create a picture in my mind. I frequently get so strongly absorbed in one thing that I lose sight of other things. I often notice small sounds when others do not. I usually notice car number plates or similar strings of information. Other people tell me that what I have said is impolite, even though I think it is polite frequently. When I'm reading a story, I can easily imagine what the characters might look like. I am fascinated by dates. I find social situations easy. Definitely agree, slightly disagree, definitely disagree. I tend to notice details that others do not. I would rather go to a library than a party. I find myself drawn more strongly to people than things. When I talk, it isn't always easy for others to get a word in edgewise. I find it hard to make new friends. Okay, it does not upset me if my daily routine is disturbed. I find it easy to read between the lines when someone is talking to me. And finally, I am fascinated by numbers. Great. Well, that's everything. So, how are you feeling now? Everything okay? Wonderful. Well, as I said, what we'll do now is we'll take all of this information along with the other information that you've given us previously and we'll pop it all together in a report. We'll share all that with you, including all the responses that you've given us today. And then what we'll do is we'll invite you back and we can sit and discuss the findings. And from there, if we need to take anything forwards, we can do. But in the meantime, I'd ask you not to worry while you're waiting for this report and that everything will be okay. It was lovely meeting you today and getting to know you, and I look forward to seeing you again very soon. Take care of yourself. Bye-bye.